I saw Kevin load his briefcase from our bedroom doorway, and it broke my heart. Our relationship seemed like a heavy fog that had engulfed our formerly happy home and was holding us both down. I muttered, "I can't believe you're doing this," hardly audible above a whisper. Kevin looked up, his eyes cold. "I'm going to the office, Amelia. Someone needs to maintain things in this family." His motivations were painful and very wounding. They served as a sharp reminder of the decision I had taken only days earlier. I responded, "You know that's not fair," as I retreated into the room. I could feel the building wrath in my chest in reaction. "I quit my job for us, for our family." He snapped his briefcase shut, clearly frustrated. "No, you quit your job because you could no longer handle the stress. Do you now expect me to pick up the slack as well?" I winced at what he said. It was true that I was having trouble adjusting to being a stay-at-home mom, but I had no idea how hateful Kevin would be. "I'm trying, Kevin," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "It's not easy to give up a career I loved." He sighed deeply and ran a hand over his hair. "I don't want to get into a fight. We need to talk about some important business this evening." The sound of little feet splattering down the hallway stopped us before we could say anything more. With her teddy bear fiercely clasped to her bosom and her golden locks ruffled, our daughter Harriet emerged from the doorway. She questioned naively, "Mommy, Daddy, why are you fighting?" I knelt to her level and feigned a grin. "Dear, we're not fighting. Daddy and I were just chatting." Harriet was scooped up by Kevin, who then kissed her forehead. "Your mom is correct, Princess. Everything is all right. How about you go look for Grandma? She's probably preparing pancakes." I felt a tinge of regret as Harriet ran off. How many times had small ears heard our arguments? Kevin put down his suitcase, and his face softened a little. "All right, tonight we'll discuss. I have a suggestion that might help us get back on course." I simply nodded, not believing I could say anything. I had the unshakable impression that something was very wrong in our family, between us. As he was leaving for work, I was nervous about the conversation we would be having that evening and what it would mean for our future. The nagging doubt, dull chores, and my in-laws' constant chatting made the day drag on. I was uncomfortable and hungry, waiting for the adult talk to finish that didn't revolve around gossip or grandkids. By the time Kevin got back home with the kids, well after they were asleep, we retired to the study after supper. Breaking the quiet, Kevin leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. He started off by saying, "I've been thinking about how we can tackle some of our challenges." I arched an eyebrow. With a little smile on his lips, he nodded. "What if we buy my parents a house with some of our savings? They could get closer, assist with the kids more, and take up a lot of the burden for the two of us." I sensed the air in the room disappear. What about the funds we set aside for our future, the college funds for the kids? Kevin stopped smiling. "I assumed you would be pleased with this. It offers a lot of solutions to our issues." I raised my voice, my frustration reverberating. "Our issues? With your parents?" With a look of annoyance on his face, Kevin stood up. "Why do you make things so hard for me? It's the best course of action for our family." I watched in disbelief as he stormed out. Was anything like this actually happening? Had my spouse suddenly proposed, without my consent, to spend our life savings to purchase a home for his parents? Feeling more alone than ever, I buried my face in my hands. What was going to happen to me? And more importantly, how had we arrived at this point? The following morning, I heard quiet sounds coming from the kitchen, which I assumed were those of Kevin and his mother. I walked down the corridor, being cautious not to trip on the noisy floorboard next to the stairs. "Mom, she's being unreasonable," Kevin said in a clear voice. I assumed she would be pleased with this. His mother gave a kind but clear response. Oh my goodness. Some ladies simply cannot bear the demands of raising a family. Not every person is suited for it. I bit my lip as hurt and rage battled within me. Was that how people understood me? That I was unable to manage it? Perhaps if we just moved forward with the plans. Kevin said, she might change her mind. Really, it's for the best. I had had enough. Not bothering to hide my anger, I stormed into the kitchen. Kevin, for whom is this best? With remorse lighting up their cheeks, they both sprang to recover. Kevin's mother put on a cheesy smile. Good morning, my love. How was your night's sleep? Disregarding her, I concentrated on my husband. Were you going to talk behind my back about this, or were you going to discuss it with me at all? Even Kevin seemed a little embarrassed. Amelia, that isn't how it is. We were only talking. I interrupted him. Talking about making big financial decisions without me? About the future, ours and our children's? His mother intervened, always the mediator. Let's not get too fired up just yet. Would you mind if I took the kids to the park so you two could have some alone time? She was yelling for Harriet and Jason as she hurried out of the kitchen before I could object. There was a sharp stillness between Kevin and me when the front door closed. You cannot continue doing this, I murmured quietly. You cannot continue to exclude me from decisions that impact our family. Kevin let out a sigh and ran his fingers through his hair. Amelia, I'm not shoving you out. I'm searching for answers. Kevin, you've been the one who's been distant, I snapped. You've been acting like a failure ever since you persuaded me to quit my job because you said I needed to focus on the family. I reasoned and moved away from him as he grabbed me. That is incorrect. Simply put, I believed that doing this would simplify things. Parents might assist with the children, you'd receive more assistance. I gave a sour laugh. Your father hardly recognizes me, and your mother can hardly contain her hatred for me. Kevin grew stern-faced. That is unfair. They have been really supportive since you left your work. Supportive? I sneered. They have been choked. You want to spend our money to buy them a house, but I can't make a single choice about our kids without your mother questioning me. He raised his palms. What else should we do with it? We could use the assistance since it is currently available. I looked into his eyes and saw him clearly for the first time in many months. This man is not the one I wed. This is someone else entirely. Kevin, I can't handle this anymore, I said. I refuse to be excluded within my own family. His face became more composed. Come on, Amelia. We are able to resolve this. We just must. He was cut off by the sound of the front door opening and the enthusiastic chatter of our children, accompanied by the voices of his parents. Daddy! Mommy! Harriet yelled. See what we discovered at the park. I forced a grin onto my face as our daughter ran into the kitchen, brandishing a glittering pebble. However, I saw Kevin's mother's rough glance above her head. She was certain that she had won this round. I silently vowed, as I bent to gaze at Harriet's treasure, that this wasn't the end. I wouldn't allow them to drive me away from my own family. Something needed to shift quickly. Staring at the laptop screen in front of me, I sat at the kitchen table. I could see glimmers of the life I had left behind in each email and message that scrolled by. My fingers itched to write a resume so I could go back to practicing law, where I used to be quite successful. I was brought back to reality by the sound of Kevin's car driving into the driveway. I shut off the laptop quickly as remorse overcame me. How did I get here? Hadn't I promised my family this? When Kevin spotted me, his face lit up, and he came in. There you are. Hello. We could take the kids out to supper today. I was thinking, what do you think? I faked a laugh. That sounds fantastic. Where are the children? He answered, Mom took them to the mall. She said something about fresh school clothes. My lips twisted into a grin. Did she succeed? I believed that this weekend we had decided to accomplish it together. Without seeming to notice my dismay, Kevin shrugged. Mom extended an offer. I thought you would get a vacation from it. A break? As if I needed to get away from my own children. I tried not to cry while I swallowed my hurt. Kevin, we need to talk about your parents, about this whole scenario. His shoulders stiffened as he groaned. Not this again, Amelia. I believe that this was behind us. What was the past? I asked. Past me making decisions for our family? I got up, my rage exploding. Kevin, you can't just keep making decisions on your own. Not about our savings in particular. He narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? I inhaled deeply. Earlier, I heard you talking on the phone. You were conversing with a real estate agent, right? Kevin looked surprised and flushed. It was only a preliminary discussion. I was obtaining data without first speaking with me, I concluded on his behalf. He raked a hand through his hair once again, his voice brimming with frustration. Amelia, what do you want from me? I'm attempting to act in our family's best interests. Our family, I said once again. Not the talk of your folks, not the idealized version of our family that your mother had. We, Kevin, me, you, and the children. He fired back. My parents are part of our family too. Why do you not see that? Something inside of me snapped. Because they're assuming control. Your father ignores me during family dinners. Your mother scolds me for being a parent, and you're allowing it to happen. Kevin grew stern-faced. That is unfair. They only want to help. I chuckled in disbelief. Is that what you call it when your mother insults my parenting? When your father avoids me at family dinners? Kevin responded, You're exaggerating. But I could tell he was doubting himself. I took a step forward to him and spoke in a deep, low voice. Kevin, am I mistaken? Tell me this. When was the last time your parents weren't involved in a choice that we decided on together? He parted his lips, then shut them again, unable to respond. That's what I thought, I said as my strength began to go. Kevin, I can't continue to live this way. There must be a change. I briefly had a glimpse of the thoughtful, kind man I'd married. However, he soon closed his face once more. You're accurate. Something indeed has to change. You must acknowledge that this is how we now live. Amelia, my folks are here to stay. We'll all be happier if you embrace that sooner rather than later. I was filled with shock and sadness as I looked at him. Has this actually been the state of our marriage? The sound of the front door opening and the eager talk of our kids were followed by the resounding voice of Kevin's mother. She called, We're back. And wait until you see what we bought. Kevin turned to meet his mother and our children, giving me a look that suggested quite obviously that our talk had ended. As I stood there, horrifying reality overwhelmed me. This was no longer simply about Kevin's parents. This had to do with our marriage's future, and for the first time, I wasn't sure whether it really had one. I sat at the desk in our shared study, pen poised over paper, heart thumping in my chest. The place was oddly quiet. This was it, the breaking point. I looked at my watch. It was 2:37 a.m. With his head still in the clouds, Kevin had no idea that our world was about to rock. The kids were safely nestled into their beds, oblivious to the unrest that had been building for several months. My hand trembled as I started writing. The kids and I will be gone by the time you read this, Kevin. This is no longer how I can live. My eyesight became blurry as I released years of grief, disappointment, and betrayal onto the paper. I wrote about my experiences of being ignored, about his parents' persistent interference, and about the dreams I had given up only to be viewed as an outsider in my own home. I let out a sob as I signed my name at the bottom. I smothered the sob quickly, not wanting to wake anyone. This was not the future we had planned together, and it was not how I had expected my life to turn out. However, things happen, people change, and sometimes you have to have the courage to alter your own narrative. I carefully folded the letter and put it where Kevin could see it, in the middle of his desk. Quietly, I made my way upstairs in an attempt to rouse the kids. "Mommy," I shook Harriet gently awake, and she murmured something sleepy. "What's wrong?" she inquired while rubbing her eyes. I whispered, "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," and lied, "We're taking a little getaway. Could you please assist me with your brother like a big girl?" Though still half sleepy, she nodded. Being the lighter sleeper of the two, Jason was usually simpler to wake up. In a matter of minutes, I had them both dressed and prepared to depart, holding their beloved stuffed animals firmly in their arms. I held my breath as we tiptoed down the steps, hoping that Kevin wouldn't wake up. His snoring from our bedroom was a comforting sound, but it also cut deeply. I no longer felt like I knew this man whom I had previously loved more than anything. We arrived at the car without any problems. Harriet's little voice sliced through the evening air as I strapped the children into their seats. "Where's Daddy, Mommy?" "Will he not go with us?" Even though I knew the question was coming, I froze, unprepared for it. "No, my dear. Daddy must remain here, but don't worry. We'll see him shortly." Even though the lie hurt my tongue, I couldn't bring myself to utterly destroy their reality. Not quite yet. My attention was drawn to a movement as I slid into the driver's seat. Kevin's mother was standing there in the upstairs window. When our gazes locked, time seemed to stop. I saw the beginning of comprehension, a spark of wrath, and then, shockingly, something that nearly seemed like satisfaction. I fired the engine and slid out of the driveway without thinking. I drove through the lonely, dark streets with shaking palms on the steering wheel. To what destination were we heading? How would we proceed? My head was filled with questions that felt like they would never end. However, I felt calmer when I looked at my sleeping kids in the rearview mirror. We would work things out. It was necessary for us too. My phone buzzed just as the first rays of dawn were starting to strike the sky. My blood ran cold as I saw Kevin's name flash on the screen with a message. "You have no right to remove my kids. My attorney will get back to you. Amelia, you're not going to get away with this." My resolve strengthened, and I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Now, there was no turning back. I would confront the next challenge and any upcoming struggles for the sake of my children and myself. I allowed myself a tiny grin as the sun rose, casting a picture of opportunity and optimism over the earth. This was only the start of a new chapter in our narrative, not its conclusion. I arrived at a dilapidated motel's parking lot, fatigued, filling my body despite the mess in our lives. The children's faces were serene as they slept soundly in the back seat. I was about to cry as I propped my head on the steering wheel when I heard a tap on the window. "Amelia? Is that you?" Blinking in shock, I looked up. My high school best friend, Jasmine, was there, gazing through the glass, a face I hadn't seen in a long time. "Jasmine," I gasped out, wiped my eyes hastily, and got out of the car. "What are you doing here?" She drew me into a close embrace. "This place is managed by me. Yet I forget about myself. What is happening? Are you all right?" Something inside me shattered at the concern in her voice. Before I knew it, I was crying in Jasmine's arms and telling her the entire tale in between breaths. With each phrase, Jasmine's expression became more serious as she listened. After I was done, Jasmine gave me a shoulder squeeze. "You won't remain in this hole. Come on, I'll give you my extra room." After an hour, The kids were nestled into cozy beds, and I took a seat at Jasmine's kitchen table, enjoying a warm cup of tea. "So, what's your plan?" Jasmine inquired politely. Feeling confused, I gazed into my tea. "I'm not sure. I simply could not stay there any longer. However, I can see from Kevin's text that he will fight for the kids." Jasmine's eyes became stony. "You attack, Amelia. You've always been the sharpest person I know. You're capable of doing this." "I don't even have an attorney," I said as the truth of my position hit home. A cunning smirk appeared on Jasmine's face. "To be honest, I think I could assist with that. Do you recall Stephen from your time in high school?" A beat skipped in my heart. Stephen was the boy I'd secretly lusted after for years. What about him? "He's a divorce lawyer now, one of the best in the state," Jasmine reasoned. She paused, then took a step forward. "He always had a thing for you." My cheeks began to flush, and then I felt guilty. As I was leaving my spouse, I found myself blushing over a crush from high school. "Jazz, I cannot afford a top-tier attorney." Jasmine dismissively waved her hand. "Let me speak with him. Just get along with him, please, for me." My phone buzzed, and it was another text from Kevin. Before I could reply, the message read, "My folks are worried. How could you harm our family in this way? I'll make sure you never see the kids again. So go home immediately." I gave Jasmine the message while shaking my hands. Her expression grew serious. "That resolves the matter. Stephen is the first person I'm phoning in the morning." That night, I couldn't fall asleep while I lay in bed. The sensation that I was perched on a cliff persisted in my mind. Stephen's meeting seemed like the end of the road, like my marriage had officially ended. However, as I considered Kevin's icy reasons and his parents' oppressive presence, I concluded that my marriage had long since ended. I just hadn't had the guts to say it. I heard Jasmine's voice in the corridor when I woke up the following morning. "Yes, Stephen, you can meet her at 2 p.m. Many thanks for it." Jasmine turned to face me as I came out of the bedroom, her expression a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Amelia, Stephen agreed to meet with you today." My heart pounded. This was the turning point in my life and the turning point in my children's lives as well. "Great," I said, astonished by the volume of my voice. I hugged my drowsy kids and got ready for the day. As I did, hope kindled in me, something I hadn't felt in years. I no longer felt alone. No matter what lay ahead, I felt ready to fight for the life I deserved. For the first time in a very long time, I waited in Stephen's office, smoothing down my shirt and attempting to get my anxiety under control. It was obvious he had changed from the bashful youngster I recalled. When he stepped in, Stephen held out his hand with a confident, comforting look on his face. "It's been too long, Amelia. I apologize that we have to meet in this manner." A familiar flutter emerged in my gut as we sat down, but I ignored it. This was about my future, my children's future, not about past crushes or what-ifs. Stephen listened carefully as I described my circumstances, his brow furrowing at every new detail. He leaned forward, his gaze fierce. After I was done, he said, "I will not sugarcoat this, Amelia. This may turn heated, especially with Kevin's parents involved and his wealth. However, I can assure you that we will battle to the death." Something within me was sparked by his words, a fire I had long since forgotten. How do we start? We plotted for the next 60 minutes as Stephen described our strategy. I sensed the return of my previous legal feelings, and we began discussing the details. When my phone beeped, I quickly looked at the screen. It was Kevin. I said, "It's Kevin. I have to take this." As I left Stephen's office, Kevin's tone was composed and icy. "Where are you, Amelia?" "My parents are devastated. The children must be brought home right now." Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself. "No, Kevin, I'm not going to return. I've hired an attorney. Please get in touch with him for any more matters." A moment of startled quiet fell. Then Kevin's voice became angry. "Do you really believe you can take my kids and get away with it, Amelia? I'm going to ruin you. You'll be lucky if you see them again when I'm through." The call ended. Stephen put his hand on my shoulder and pulled me back to the present moment as I stood there trembling. "Are you all right?" he asked, his expression filled with worry. I nodded and wiped away the tears I hadn't even realized I was shedding. "Stephen, he made threats to abduct the children." With his hands resting on my shoulders, he said, "Hey, we will not let it occur, Amelia. You're not alone in this battle and stronger than you realize." I was overcome with feelings as I stared into his eyes, dread, thankfulness, and something more I couldn't quite put my finger on. I took a step back and collected myself. What should we do next? Stephen's face took on a serious expression. "We must apply for temporary custody right now. We also need to discuss your career, Amelia." Puzzled, I blinked. "My profession?" But I abandoned that. "Exactly," Stephen said in a stern tone. "And in court, that will be used against us. We must demonstrate your ability to care for the kids independently." It was something that struck me like a stone. I had sacrificed everything for my family, and now I could lose my kids because of that one sacrifice alone. With uncertainty beginning to seep in, I said, I don't know if I can go back." Stephen grew more determined. "Amelia, I knew in high school was a determined individual who could accomplish anything. You only need to locate her again. That woman is still there." That day when I walked out of Stephen's office, my head was spinning. Rebuilding my profession, fighting Kevin and his parents, and attempting to keep my kids safe felt like an impossible task. But I felt a glimpse of optimism for the first time in years. Harriet's big eyes met mine as I tucked her and Jason into bed that evening. "When are we going home, Mama?" My heart tightened. "Oh, my dear," I replied, drawing her near. "We're at home now. Our home is wherever we are when we are together." I vowed in silence as I held my daughter. I would build us a new home, one that was free of love, respect, and hardship. No matter how long it took or how fierce the battle was, I was prepared for the difficult path ahead. The old Amelia was coming to her senses and ready to reclaim her life. In front of me stood the courtroom, a rising reminder of the conflict I was going to engage in. Grasping my suitcase firmly, I attempted to calm my anxiety. Our interim custody court was today, and I knew that Kevin and his parents would make a big deal out of it. Stephen touched my shoulder with a kind hand. "You can succeed, Amelia. Keep in mind all we've planned." I nodded. As we stepped into the building, I inhaled deeply. I saw Kevin, his parents, and their attorney huddled together. My fury boiled at my mother-in-law's nasty expression. When the hearing started, I watched in growing terror as Kevin's attorney presented me as an unstable, careless mother who had deserted her family on a whim. They brought up my choice to resign from my position, misrepresenting it as proof that I couldn't support the kids. Stephen expertly made our case when it was our turn, emphasizing my years of successful legal practice and commitment to my kids. However, I noticed the judge's doubtful look. Uncertainty tore at me. Had I committed a grave error? I noticed Kevin's mother talking loudly in the hallway during our recess break. Naturally, as soon as we gain custody, we'll be moving in to help with the kids, instead of some unstable mother who can't decide what she wants out of life. They need a secure environment. A part of me broke. I marched up to her before I had a chance to consider. "How could you?" I growled. "From the beginning, you have been attempting to push me away. Guess what, though? I'm over being treated unfairly. I will use every ounce of might to battle you for those children of mine." Kevin's father moved to separate us. Amelia, you've gone insane. Right now, you're supporting our argument that you're unfit to be a parent. When I turned to face Jasmine, her eyes were flaming. I felt a touch on my arm. Remove yourself, she told my in-laws. You are no longer allowed to harass her. Stephen showed up as a gathering formed and gently drew me away. This isn't helping, Amelia. We must pay attention to the hearing. However, the harm had already been done. As soon as we entered the courtroom again, I sensed the judge's critical stare. My outburst had given Kevin the upper hand. Given the evidence submitted and the recent display in the hallway, the judge said, I'm inclined to grant temporary custody to the father with supervised visits for the mother. The entire globe appeared to be tilted. My breathing stopped. This cannot be taking place. Stephen asked for a break right away, and the judge reluctantly agreed. I followed him into a private conference room. In drowsiness, Stephen pleaded, Pay attention to me, Amelia. We still have work to do, but we must adjust our strategy. You must demonstrate to the judge that you are a responsible, stable parent who prioritizes your kids. With tears flowing down my cheeks, I gave a mute nod. However, Stephen, how are they going to take my babies? I can't let them go. His gaze was fierce as he held on to my shoulders. I need you to get yourself together because we are going to fight this. I know Amelia, who never gives up. She refuses to be bullied by anyone. Where's that Amelia? His comments ignited a flame of purpose within me, piercing through my sadness. I straightened my back as I wiped my eyes. She is here, and she is prepared for battle. I saw Kevin and his parents as we were about to enter the courtroom again, and their arrogant looks strengthened my determination. This was no longer just about me. It was also about proving to my kids what it meant to stand up for oneself and escape their hold on me. After inhaling deeply, I squared my shoulders. The conflict had not ended. It was only getting started, in fact. And this time, I was prepared for battle. With my pulse racing, I watched the judge get ready to hand down his decision in the courtroom. It had taken months of struggles, restless nights, and unwavering resolve to get to this point. Seated on the other side were Kevin's parents and himself, their expressions a mix of hate and confidence. The judge's voice echoed through the hushed chamber as he spoke. This court has carefully considered all presented evidence in the matter of custody for Jason and Harriet. Feeling Stephen's comforting presence alongside me, I held my breath. The world appeared to stop when the judge announced that Amelia Matthews would receive primary custody and that Kevin Matthews would have significant visitation rights. As the court proceeded to go over the specifics of the custody agreement, I could only concentrate on the tremendous sensation of relief and vindication that rushed over me. I heard Kevin's mother gasp and saw Kevin's face crumple in shock. Stephen looked up at me. His smile was contagious, encouraging. And more than that, it made my heart skip a beat. Kevin came over to me outside the courthouse, his parents watching from a distance. Amelia, I'm sorry for everything, he murmured quietly. I nodded, astonished that I didn't feel angry. I apologize as well, Kevin, but this is best for all of us. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as they left. Not only had I prevailed in the custody dispute, but I had also won my independence. Jasmine came running up and gave me a bear hug. You succeeded, girl. I knew you could. I laughed so hard that happy tears ran down my cheeks. Jasmine, without you, I could not have succeeded. You gave me hope when I had none that night at the hotel, and you rescued me. She gave my hand a squeeze. That is the purpose of friends. Go now and enjoy the occasion with your children. And perhaps a certain attractive lawyer. I looked at Stephen, who was putting his briefcase away, and his face flushed. My gut gave me that recognizable flutter as our eyes locked. After a happy reunion with Harriet and Jason later that evening, I sat on Jasmine's porch and watched the sunset. Stephen came over to join me, holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed me a glass and said, "To new beginnings." I grinned and gently tapped my glass against his. "To fresh starts." Stephen finally said something after a little period of comfortable silence. "You know, Amelia, from what I've been seeing these past few months, you're amazing. I can see that you've changed from that first day when you came into my office. The way you battled for yourself and your kids." I nodded, a wave of pride rising within me. "I'm not. I just discovered aspects of who I had assumed to be lost forever." Stephen reached out to touch me, and his touch ignited something within me. "Maybe we could grab dinner sometime, just the 2 of us, now that the dust has settled." Looking into his eyes, I saw adoration, tenderness, and the possibility of something more. I hesitated for a moment, old fears trying to resurface, but then I reflected on everything I had overcome and achieved. "Yes, please," I said in a low voice. I reflected on my path, all of the struggles, despairing moments, and suffering that had brought me to this point. I knew this was where it had all ended as the last of the sunlight cast vivid hues over the sky. I had reclaimed my power, my independence, and a support system I never knew I needed. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future, even if everything was still unclear. I still had my children, my independence, and perhaps a lifetime of love ahead of me. This was only the beginning. It wasn't the end. I realized this was my new beginning as I tasted my wine and felt Stephen's warm hand in mine. I was ready to savor each and every moment,